Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got another court update. It says U.S. court blocks Trump from imposing bulk of his tariffs. Federal court on Wednesday ruled that Donald Trump overstepped his authority to impose sweeping tariffs that have raised the cost of imports for everyone, from giant businesses to everyday Americans. That's the CNN crap. That's completely false, by the way. They've raised the cost for everyone. Really? Then why is inflation down? Where is the... See, this thing is I just pick a random article, and within the first sentence, and the thing is with CNN, you get news from different places, but like this is the idea that, number one, the tariffs can't even be properly implemented without people throwing a hissy fit. You can't even restructure U.S. trade because people complain after an increase of like 5% in terms of price. But if anything, the tariffs have brought energy down. It's brought gas down. Gas is down all over the place. This is a complete misrepresentation of what the tariffs have done. I'm sorry. I'm going to be trying to be more joyous, but you see the first sentence and it's just ridiculous. Oh, the administration appealed the decision Wednesday. If you were going to try and strike down these Trump tariffs, saying he's not within his authority to unilaterally assign all these tariffs, this should have happened on April 3rd. You know what that day was? That was the day after Liberation Day. What are these... At this point, we're so far into the ball game in terms of these tariffs. They're already brought down. The tariffs are at 10%, and on China, they're only 30%. We're trying to renegotiate trade deals to get the U.S. in a better position, to get the VATs eliminated, which is the same thing as tariffs, just dressed up differently so liberals don't... It's like, oh, they're not tariffing us. Yeah, well, they hit us with VATs. It's a value-added tax on our imports into other countries to make our foreign products, when we ship them places, less desirable, less attractive. They devalue our currency. They do all these different things. So Trump's trying to get us a better trade deal. People complain. He said, all right, I'm going to bring... And honestly, it was also other indicators as well. Don't get me wrong, it was. But Trump says, all right, I'll bring the tariffs back down. It's 10% for everyone outside of China. And then there's some other stipulations, including the auto tariffs, which are widely supported in terms of bipartisan, because people think we can make cars in the United States and we get ripped off. So the tariffs are already brought down. What is this court ruling exactly? We're trying to work out trade deals. This is like when Rand Paul and people in Congress are like, oh, we got to stop the tariffs. It's too late for that. Even if you think that there was something, obviously the president is allowed to impose his tariffs, and this nothing is going to come of this. It can't. They're already brought down. We're trying to negotiate. It's like we have sacrificed to be able to negotiate a better trade deal with countries, just like we did with the UK. So why would we, via our own federal court, ruin the chance of that? It's like, I could understand if this actually played out. See, this is just a complete lie. Raised the cost of imports for everyone, from giant businesses to everyday Americans. Why are the tariffs at 10% then? Like, it's like, how? So where are the giant price hikes? The tariffs have been at 10% for over a month. So where are the price hikes? I could understand if Trump had kept the tariffs on, the crazy aggressive Liberation Day tariffs. But, if you do something like that, you're trying to rebalance. Nobody really knows what Trump was trying to do. It was a last second decision to where, he said it's reciprocal. It really wasn't reciprocal. But the point is, I could understand a federal court saying, all right, this is because that would seriously affect the picture in terms of prices if he would have kept those crazy tariffs on, but they immediately were taken off. And it was a negotiating window, and we're negotiating with these countries. But it's like, the timeline doesn't align with this. It doesn't even make sense. I could understand if you said, okay, it has to be an emergency thing right after Liberation Day. You can't come back a month and a half later after we've already we even negotiated the tariff down with China. And they say, well, it's temporary. Right. So there's a negotiating window. That's what Trump likes to do. He likes pressuring. It's the same thing with the EU. Trump says, well, you know what? The EU is not even talking to me. I'm going to go public and say we're going to tariff them at a 50% rate starting June 1st. Well, then they say, you know what, we'll talk to you now. Okay, then we're going to delay the tariff until July 9th or whenever they requested. That's what the EU requested. It be the new deadline was July 9th. I think that's the Liberation Day deadline. But after he had the Liberation Day and then he paused them and then said it was 3 months. And then the deadline, I think, is sometime in early July. But I can't fathom the thought process of these courts. There should have been an emergency. But even then, it's like Trump, he has the authority as the head, as the leader of the executive branch to do unilateral tariffs. This is totally legal. And they say, well, he's doing too many. And it's the U.S. Court of International Trade, a relatively low-profile court in Manhattan, stopped Trump's global tariffs. I wonder if they would stand up if a Democrat did. You know what? I wonder if, and this is just so insane on how this stuff works, if there was any responsibility of the Biden administration for allowing, and I don't want to do a whataboutism, but like allowing 20 million illegals into the country, nothing happens to them. Does that get stopped by a court? Hey, maybe you shouldn't erode all of our proper border laws to keep people from flooding into the country. Maybe that should be taken up into a federal court. I don't think that ever was brought up. I'm not going to do a whataboutism because it's stupid, because this is not even something that's illegal. But on top of it, it doesn't make sense. There should have been an emergency filing if they really thought what Trump was doing was horrible. We're too late in the ballgame. The tariffs have been brought down already. We're trying to negotiate these trade deals. You need to stay out of it. We're going to get better trade deals. Why would we stop ourselves from getting better trade deals? It's like we're negotiating with these countries, and then it's like, oh, you know what? We're about to negotiate a better, more advantageous trade deal for my country, the United States. I'm about to negotiate that, but my federal court says I'm not allowed to. So we only have 10% tariffs on you, and where is can somebody tell me it's raised the cost of imports for everyone from giant businesses to everyday Americans? Then why is inflation, if you look at the core inflation or the truflation, the core inflation 2 out of 3 months Trump's been in, it's been lower than expected. And by the way, Trump's numbers on inflation, his approval on inflation now is going up. So where is this massive price increase? Why don't you take a look at energy? Why don't you take a look at crude oil, the gas prices? They're all down. So where's the massive increase? There can't even be a massive increase. He didn't keep the tariffs on long enough for there to be an increase. So they hate the tariffs. Then Trump takes the tariffs off, and they still say the tariffs cause a massive increase when inflation is down. Okay. And look, you can say, I understand if you're going to tariff China at 145% rate, even if just for a few weeks, it is going to drive certain prices up in terms of imports from China. But that's a bigger picture. We can't even do bigger picture in the country because people just complain the second anything goes up. There's no bigger picture. If McDonald's costs 30 cents tomorrow, we can't live. And there's like immense pressure putting on Trump. These shoes from China cost 45 cents more than they did under Biden. We have to eliminate the tariffs. The tariffs are evil. Well, no, it's a longer term picture, but we can't do it. We just can't. Trump's just like, we can't do it. We can't even do it. So we negotiated down to 30%. There's 30% tariffs on China. If that really causes a massive price spike, I mean, Trump has already bullied these corporations to not raise their prices. He'll do it. He did it with Walmart. He did it with Amazon. Amazon was so angry about the tariffs. They were going to say, we're going to put pressure on the administration, because that's exactly what that was. If you remember what Amazon was going to do, they were planning on putting the price, and then under it, this is how much you lost because of the tariffs. This is the tariff tax. And they do that on some Chinese, like AliExpress. They'll show like service fees, and they still have it, although at this point you would think it would be relatively tame if it's only a 30% tariff. And again, the tariffs are like very complicated in terms of sometimes they're applied, other times they're not. It depends. But this is just, why would this ruling come out now? The tariffs are already down to 10%. And I know it's a timeline they have to negotiate, but let's be honest. Do we really think that Trump is going to, at this point, raise the tariffs significantly again? I mean, at worst case, you have to let him negotiate. But I mean, this is all legal what Trump is doing, but it's just, so we'll see where this goes. It says the order halts Trump's 30% tariffs on China, 25% tariffs on goods imported from Mexico and Canada, and 10%. So it's basically all the tariffs. 10% universal tariffs. 10% tariffs. That's what's causing a catastrophic price increase is 10% tariffs. Where's the price increase happening exactly? Why is inflation down? Why are all the metrics saying grocery prices in everyday good prices are down? I mean, where are the metrics that say everything is up? This is complete crap. It doesn't even make sense. The tariffs weren't even on long. It's like you want to implement the tariffs. People say the tariffs are bad. You take the tariffs off, then they say, no, the tariffs caused all of this. Well, according to what metric exactly? You want to talk about higher prices after the last administration? Are you kidding me? Yeah, let's compare the trueflation of the Biden administration versus the Trump administration. When Biden entered with basically no inflation, albeit because we're dealing with COVID, but still, given a clean slate, the Fed keeps the interest rates at zero for 7 months too long, and it drives inflation. How does the United States have 11% inflation, and they try and say, well, other countries had inflation too? That's complete crap. There were many countries that had inflation under control during COVID. How does the United States, that has the global reserve currency, have a 9% inflation, 11% trueflation, and then the Fed doesn't get any blame for that? The Biden administration is like, oh, it was going to happen anyways because of COVID. No, that's complete crap. But I mean, listen, when it comes to this is, we're in the middle of negotiating with these countries. What are you talking about? This doesn't even make sense. The only way something like this would make sense is if there was an emergency filing the day after Liberation Day. Because then it's all the massive tariffs are on, but the timeline is so far past that. The tariffs have been brought down to 10%, and it's negotiations with these countries, and there's going to be tariffs that are kept on a lot of these countries, albeit at a small percent, just like the UK deal, to where in certain areas the tariff of 10% was kept on, and that enables us to bring in about $6 or $7 billion in revenue from the UK with our trade deal per year. I'm not saying it's a lot of money relative to our debt problem and everything like that. I get it. It's not much, but I'm just saying, as an example, even when we negotiate these deals, there are going to be some tariffs that remain. But it's like this is not a novel thing. Other countries have significant trade barriers against the United States. That's why Trump is doing this. And so the article says at the bottom, potentially headed to the Supreme Court, as these rulings always tend to do. And so we'll see what happens here. But again, this doesn't even make sense based on the timing. It's like Trump is trying to negotiate with these countries. We're going to negotiate a better trade deal with you. Oh, wait, an international court said I can't negotiate a better trade deal. That's unfortunate. You could argue that tariffs have brought inflation down as well, very easily. You could argue that, especially the energy prices. Remember, that's what they were originally saying. You know what they were saying? They were saying it was going to be a recession. You understand what that is in terms of how you interpret that with economics? They were coping because inflation was going down so much, in part because of the energy. Well, the core inflation doesn't take into account energy, but the trueflation was 2%, 1.6, 1.5%. So they're like, well, no, it can't be that Trump is bringing inflation down. It's because they're bracing for a recession. Remember that? That's just liberal cope because of the economic indicators and how good they were in terms of low inflation. They're like, well, it must mean it's a recession. And then remember, we got the rating of minus 0.3% in GDP growth. Oh, it's minus 0.3 after all of that. And if Trump would have dumped money just like Biden did and spent money, it would have been a positive growth rate. So we wouldn't even be close to a recession if Trump just would have spent money like the Biden administration. But Trump doesn't want to do that. But I think we're going to have positive. Nobody's talking about a recession. We're probably going to have positive GDP growth when the numbers come out in late July for quarter two. And so where's the recession? Because they had to immediately, once they saw the energy sector down, the immediate cope is, oh, it's a recession. It must be a recession. But then Trump tamed the tariffs, brought them down, and the inflation is staying down even with a recovered market now. And we're seeing negotiations happen, and we've already got a trade deal, and we've got reports that a trade deal with India is very close, a trade deal with South Korea, Japan, and even China, it's progressing. And so, and the US and China want the same thing. China doesn't want to be fully reliant on the United States. They've brought their reliance on us in terms of trade down, and the surplus is going to continue to come down with this new trade deal with China if it's worked out. But I think Trump will just give an extension anyways if it's not. Look, I don't know what Trump is going to do. He does these things with the tariffs. What a stupid question that lady asked yesterday. How are you in the Oval Office and you ask, people say you chicken out on tariffs. What a stupid question. Genuinely. It's like, oh no, it's called strategy, honey. And now I'll get called sexist for just saying that. But, I mean, seriously. It's just like, why don't you show some class? Why don't you show some class? You don't ask Trump that question. That's ridiculous. But I mean, we have to deal with this stuff with these courts. I mean, what are you doing? You're about a month and a half too late. This has progressed beyond whatever your little, oh, it's illegal to do this. It's already solved. The tariffs have been brought down. We're negotiating. You're behind. Your ruling is irrelevant. Why doesn't the Supreme Court just say your ruling is irrelevant? It doesn't even make sense. You're saying something, you should have ruled on this a month ago. But even then, the Supreme Court should throw it out. Because Trump can do it. He invoked an emergency power. It's within the law. They said, oh, no, it's not. No, it's because of how much we're getting ripped off. Trump is going to unilaterally do this. He has the authority. This is the reality. You can't stop it. And so that's just how it is. But it doesn't even make sense now. See, if they came out the day after Liberation Day, I'd be like, all right, let's see what this is. Because there was a bunch of liberals going crazy. But even this, it's like, in this country, there's no way you could actually change anything long-term for the better in terms of the economy, because people just scream and say you can't do that because it's going to take down the price of the price of a Big Mac is going to go up by 5 cents for the next 3 weeks. We can't have that. Yeah, and you don't want to say this because technically, the new bill Trump has, it is making the debt worse, and I don't agree with that. I don't. I think it's a big problem. The thing is I don't have a problem with the debt. I mean, China has $15 trillion in debt. The problem is, you could say debt to GDP, although Japan has a worse debt to GDP. The real problem is servicing the debt every year. We have $1 trillion that we pay on interest because of the debt. That's the problem, and it keeps going up. That is the issue. That you can have debt, but when you're servicing it, and you have a $2 trillion deficit, 50% of that is because we have to service debt. That's the issue. But that's another story for another day. And I do, Trump's bill it's doing a lot of good stuff. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the debt going up, but who knows? I mean, maybe with we're going to stimulate the economy with these tax cuts. Maybe we'll make it up and we'll run negative. There's a lot of stuff they're cutting. They're finally cutting into Medicaid, which people say, no, they're not cutting it. Well, no, you're right. They're not cutting it for citizens. They're taking out the illegal benefits, and that's a good distinction. But listen, this is just, it doesn't even make sense. I don't even understand what they're saying. You're a month behind. You're 2 months behind. You're a month and a half behind. The timeline has moved in terms of this. It doesn't even make sense. That's the same thing with Rand Paul saying, well, he shouldn't be able to do this. Well, it's too late. You need to have some type of emergency. You know what? Congress should actually vote on something. They've been on vacation about 70% of the time the past 2 months, it feels like, since Trump got in. It's been real bad. But it's like, dude, it's too late for that. There's the strategy is already playing out. We're negotiating with these countries. We're negotiating trade deals. Why would we prevent ourselves from negotiating a better trade deal? It's like in 2 years, they're going to rule that the tariffs are unconstitutional, and the tariffs at that point will be completely off. So it's like, but this will get thrown out by the Supreme Court, hopefully. Either way, guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.